I should have known the moment I stepped into that restaurant that I did not belong there. Everything about the place glowed with a kind of effortless luxury that made my stomach twist. The chandeliers sparkled like something out of a dream. I had no business walking into. The walls were lined with dark wood polished to a mirror shine, and every guest looked like they existed in a world where money solved every inconvenience. I stood frozen at the entrance, smoothing the hem of my $15 rented dress, praying it did not show how worn it was under the low amber lighting. My shoes already pinched my toes because the glue had started to peel from the sole earlier that afternoon while I was rushing to leave work. The hostess approached me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She looked me up and down in one slow, assessing sweep. "Are you sure you are at the right place, ma'am?" Her voice was coated in politeness, but the message underneath was sharp enough to cut. Heat crawled up my neck. "Yes, I am meeting someone. A blind date." She blinked, clearly unconvinced, but motioned for me to follow her. Every step I took felt loud. Too loud. Like everyone in the restaurant had stopped their elegant conversations just to watch the girl who clearly did not belong. The hostess stopped near the center of the room. "Your table is running a few minutes behind. You can wait at the bar." Her tone held the edge of dismissal. I nodded, trying to ignore the sting. I checked my phone. A message from Kevin would have saved me, but there was nothing. He was late. Of course he was late. I paced near the bar, pretending to examine the wine list I could never afford. My eyes drifted across the room until they landed on a man sitting alone at a small table by the window. Table number 8. He was dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, crisp fabric and clean lines that screamed expensive. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, but not arrogance. His attention was on his phone, his expression unreadable. Something about him made my breath catch for a moment. Then I saw the metal table number. 8. My blind date was supposed to be at table 8. Relief flooded through me. Finally, a way to stop feeling like a stray cat that had wandered into a penthouse. I forced air into my lungs, straightened my posture, and walked toward him before my nerves convinced me to run. "Hi," I said with a too bright smile. "You must be Kevin." "I am Harper." His head snapped up, surprise flashing across his face. He blinked as if sorting through a dozen thoughts before answering. "Oh, hi." His voice was warm, deeper than I expected, and calm in a way that instantly softened something tight in my chest. Before he could say anything else, I sank into the chair across from him. "Sorry if this is awkward. Blind dates always are. I tend to talk too much when I am nervous." I laughed nervously, waving my hand in a way that was supposed to look casual, but probably looked unhinged. He opened his mouth, a hint of hesitation in his eyes, but then something shifted. He closed it again and simply studied me like he was trying to understand a puzzle he had not expected to see tonight. "No worries," he said softly. "I know the feeling." His voice had a sincerity that caught me off guard. For a moment, everything around us softened. The clinking glasses, the quiet conversations, the elegant servers walking past. I felt like maybe, just maybe, this night would not be the disaster I had feared. I joked about my awful day, my clumsy entrance, how I nearly tripped on the stairs. He actually smiled, a real smile that touched his eyes. He asked about my art, about where I grew up, about my dreams. No one ever asked me about my dreams. I thought maybe this date is not so bad. Maybe Jenny was right when she said I should give blind dates another chance. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. "Hi, Harper. I just arrived. I am at table 14. Looking forward to meeting you." The words blurred as my stomach dropped to my knees. My throat tightened. My heartbeat turned into a pounding echo in my ears. I slowly lifted my eyes to the man across from me. "You are not Kevin," I whispered. His expression softened even more, almost gentle. "No," he said quietly. "No, I am not." Shame tore through me so fast I could barely breathe. I shot up from my chair so quickly the table shook, nearly knocking over his water glass. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I backed away, clutching my bag like a shield. My face burned so fiercely I was sure the whole restaurant could see the embarrassment radiating off me. "Wait," he said, standing partway from his chair. "It is okay. You can stay if you want." His tone was calm and sincere in a way that almost made me stop. Almost. I shook my head and bolted toward the exit before he could say another word. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and I leaned against the brick wall outside, breathing hard. I had never felt smaller. I did not know it then, but that humiliating moment was the beginning of something far bigger than a ruined blind date. It was the night I stepped into the wrong world, sat at the wrong table, and somehow, without knowing it, met the man who would change everything. I spent the entire subway ride home, replaying the humiliation over and over until it felt like my chest might cave in. Every bump of the train rattled through my bones and made the memory sharper, the way his eyes had softened, the way he had said, "It is okay, stay," the way I had bolted like a frightened rabbit anyway. By the time I reached my stop, the city air felt colder, sharper, like even the streetlights knew what a fool I had been. I pushed open the door of my apartment, careful not to wake my mom sleeping in the bedroom, and collapsed onto the couch. I buried my face in a pillow and groaned so loudly I was shocked I did not wake the entire building. My phone buzzed. I almost did not look, thinking it was Jenny checking in, or maybe Kevin apologizing for being late, but the text preview froze me in place. It was from an unknown number. "I am the guy from the wrong table. Can we talk?" My heart slammed against my ribs. For a moment, I wondered if he wanted to scold me for being ridiculous, or if he wanted to laugh about it with friends later. But when I opened the message, all it said was, "You seemed real. I have not seen real in a long time." I stared at the words until they blurred. I do not know what possessed me, but my fingers typed before my brain caught up. "I am sorry for running. I thought you were someone else." A moment passed, then another message. "I know. That is why I let you sit. You looked like you needed a break." A strange warmth curled in my chest. Nobody ever noticed what I needed. Not at work, not at school, not even at home, where I spent every free moment juggling bills, errands, and taking care of my mom. Another message came. "Can we start over?" Everything in me screamed that this was weird. I did not know him. I did not owe him anything. This could be dangerous, but my instinct did not flare with fear. It hummed with something quieter. Curiosity. I typed slowly. "Coffee. Tomorrow. Afternoon." His reply was instant. "Tell me where and I will be there." The next day, my nerves were so frayed I could barely hold a pen during my morning shift. When my lunch break came, I practically speed-walked to the tiny coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. The bell chimed softly when I opened the door. He was already there, sitting at a corner table, dressed in jeans and a simple gray sweater, looking so different from the polished man I had seen the night before that I paused for a second just to make sure it was him. When he saw me, he stood quickly, almost awkwardly, as if he was not used to meeting people in places like this. "Harper, right," he said, his voice warm but hesitant. I nodded, suddenly aware of how plain my thrift store cardigan must look. "Yes. And you are the guy from table 8. I tried to say it lightly, but it came out breathy. He laughed softly. "My name is Adrian." He extended his hand politely. His handshake was gentle, not firm in that overcompensating way some men used to prove something. We sat, and for a moment, silence hovered over us. Then he said, "I want to apologize for what I asked, for not correcting you sooner. You seemed nervous." And honestly, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I liked talking to someone who did not know anything about me. I tilted my head. What exactly would I know? He smiled in a way that told me he understood more than he wanted to reveal. "Nothing important." Not yet. A server came by and Adrian ordered a simple black coffee, no fancy syrups, no special roast, just black coffee. I ordered my usual caramel latte that was way too sweet but comforting. He noticed the way I took the first sip and relaxed. "You looked like you needed that," he said. I laughed softly. "You have no idea." So we talked. I told him that I worked 2 jobs because rent kept going up. I told him my mom's arthritis was getting worse and I was trying to help with medical bills. I told him I dreamed of being an illustrator that I sketched during slow hours at the diner, that my life felt like it was always one emergency away from collapsing. I do not know why I told him all that. Maybe because he listened like every word mattered. Maybe because he did not interrupt. Maybe because he did not pity me. He just listened. And when he finally opened up about himself, all he said was, "I work in tech." I raised a brow. "That is vague." He smirked. "It is boring. Trust me." I doubted that, but I did not press. Not then. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of exhaustion, like he carried more weight than he let on. "You seem tired," I said quietly. He looked surprised. "Most people do not notice. Most people do not look." "Well, I do," I said softly. And I did. I saw the way his shoulders relaxed when he was not pretending to be someone important. I saw the way he looked at me like he was searching for something familiar in a world that had forgotten how to be gentle. Before we parted, he hesitated, then asked, "Can I see you again?" The simplicity of the question stunned me. No pressure, no assumptions, just an honest request. I took a breath. Yes. His relief was obvious, almost boyish. As I walked home, a strange lightness filled me. I had gone on a terrible blind date, sat at the wrong table, embarrassed myself in front of a stranger, and somehow ended up wanting to see that stranger again. I did not know who Adrian really was. I did not know why he looked at me like my presence made something inside him settle. I did not know why I felt safe with him after only 2 conversations. All I knew was this. I wanted to see where this went, even if I had no idea the storm I was walking into. I did not plan for him to see where I lived. Honestly, if I had known the universe was about to humiliate me for the second time in less than a week, I would have faked an emergency, sprinted in the opposite direction, or pretended I had suddenly gone deaf. But fate did not care about my pride. The following Tuesday, the city was hit with a power outage that shut down half the bus routes in my area. I had stayed late at the diner because a coworker called out sick, and by the time my shift ended, the sky was already dimming into an exhausted shade of gray. I checked my phone. No buses. No ride shares. My mom texted asking if I could bring home milk. Then another message from Adrian appeared. "Are you off work yet?" I hesitated before typing the truth. Stranded. No buses. Phone at 10%. And then his reply came so fast it startled me. "I am nearby. I can come get you." For a moment, panic flared. No, absolutely not. He would see my neighborhood. He would see the cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps. He would see everything I tried so hard to keep tucked behind polite smiles and casual jokes about being broke but fine. Still, my battery dropped to 9%, and I realized pride would not keep my mom fed. I typed reluctantly, "Okay, I am outside the diner." Minutes later, his car pulled up. Not a flashy sports car or anything that screamed wealth, just a clean black sedan that looked normal enough. He stepped out, jacket draped over his arm, and gave me a soft smile that immediately made my shame worse. "You okay?" I nodded even though my throat had tightened. "Yeah, just tired." He opened the passenger door as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The entire drive, I prayed the streetlights near my building would magically fix themselves in the next 10 minutes. They did not. When we turned into my block, the world outside his windshield looked like a different city entirely. Graffiti on metal gates. A staircase patched with duct tape where someone had broken the railing. Laundry hanging on wires outside windows. Adrian glanced around, not with judgment or disgust, but with quiet concern. Still, I felt naked. When he parked in front of my building, I wished I could sink through the floor. "This is me," I said quickly, already bracing for pity in his eyes. He looked at the cracked brick, then back at me. "Do you feel safe here?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Depends on the night." He nodded, thoughtful. "Not pitying. Just taking in the truth." I liked that more than I expected. I grabbed the grocery bag from the back seat. Adrian took it from me before I could protest. "Let me help." "It is fine," I said. "Really?" He shook his head. "I want to." We climbed the 3rd-floor stairs, and I prayed the hallway light would not flicker like it usually did. It flickered. Of course it flickered. He glanced at it but did not comment. When I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of cheap vanilla candles greeted us. My mother was sitting in her recliner massaging her swollen hands. When she saw Adrian behind me, her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Harper, you brought company." I forced a smile. "Mom, this is Adrian. He is a friend." Adrian stepped forward instantly, offering a handshake. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Hale." My mom blushed in that shy way she always did around polite people. "Oh, you are sweet. Thank you for bringing my daughter home." Before I could stop him, Adrian rolled up his sleeves and started helping put the groceries away. He moved through the tiny kitchen without hesitation, as if he had grown up in places just like this. He fixed the crooked cabinet door with a quick twist of a screwdriver he found in our junk drawer. Then he replaced the burnt-out bulb in the hallway without being asked. My mother watched him with open admiration. "Harper," she whispered to me in Vietnamese, "he is kind." I pretended not to hear her. After everything was put away, Mom invited him to stay for dinner. I expected him to decline. People like him had reservations in places with wine lists longer than our rent agreement. But he smiled. "I would love to if it is not a bother." We ate simple food, stir-fry and leftover rice. Adrian did not flinch or hesitate. He ate everything with quiet appreciation as if the meal were something special. He asked my mom about her arthritis and listened as if she were royalty. He asked me about my art and encouraged me like my dreams were not as fragile as the paper I drew on. After dinner, Mom excused herself to rest. The apartment fell into a soft silence. Adrian looked around again, his expression gentle. "You work so hard," he murmured. "You should not have to do this alone." My throat tightened painfully. "I am fine," I whispered. "Really, I have been fine for years." He shook his head slowly. "Fine is not the same as okay." The honesty in his tone cut through the walls I had built. I swallowed hard and looked away before I cracked open right in front of him. I suddenly remembered the laundry pile in the corner I had not folded, the peeling paint near the bathroom door, the tiny details of poverty that screamed louder in the presence of someone who did not live this life. I said quietly, "You were not supposed to see all this." He studied my face for a long moment. "I am glad I did." I frowned. "Why?" "Because it is real, Harper, and I like real." Something in my chest shifted, not dramatically, just a quiet tilt like a door opening a crack. When he finally left, he paused at the door. "If you need anything, a ride, help, someone to talk to." "I am here." I watched him walk down the hallway, the flickering light above his head doing its best to stay alive. For the first time in a long while, I felt something warm rising in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of something dangerously close to it. I did not hear from Adrian for 3 days, and at first I told myself it was nothing, because people got busy and life happened, and I was not the kind of girl men scheduled their lives around anyway. But by the second night, the silence made my stomach knot in a way I could not untangle. I kept replaying the last moment I saw him standing in that flickering hallway light, saying he was here if I needed anything, and the warmth in his eyes had felt too steady, too sincere to simply disappear. But people could surprise you sometimes in ways you did not want to be surprised. So I forced myself back into work and routine, even though every time my phone buzzed, my heart did a humiliating little leap, only to sink again when it was just a reminder to pay a bill or an email from a coworker asking to switch shifts. And by the 3rd day, I had fully convinced myself that I had imagined everything. The gentleness, kindness, the way he looked at me like I was someone worth understanding, and maybe I had read too. Much into his help with the groceries or the way he talked to my mom, because men sometimes acted kind for no reason at all before quietly backing out of your life. But then late that night, as I was wiping down the diner counter, my phone buzzed and his name appeared, and my breath caught so sharply I dropped the rag. The message was simple. I am outside, my chest jolted. I rushed out the front door and saw him leaning against his car, hands in his jacket pockets, head bowed slightly as if weighed down by something heavy. His hair was messier than usual, and there were shadows under his eyes, When he looked up at me, the streetlight carved gold along the sharp lines of his face, but the exhaustion in his expression was unmistakable. "You okay?" I asked, and he offered a small, strained smile. "I am sorry for disappearing. I had to deal with something." "Work," I pressed gently. "Important," he nodded. "Too important," and I hated how vague that sounded because it pulled at something inside me, something instinctive and uneasy, like he was telling the truth, but not the whole truth. I wanted to push. I wanted to ask what kind of work could swallow a man whole for days and leave him looking like he had not slept. But I also remembered the way he had avoided talking about his job every time it came up. So instead, I asked, "Are you here because something is wrong?" He shook his head not exactly, but the answer was unconvincing because he looked haunted, like someone who had stared at a fire too long and could still feel the heat on his skin. He gestured to his car. "Want to take a drive?" I hesitated. It was late. My mom was asleep and I had an early morning shift, but something in his voice made me nod, so I climbed in and we drove through the quiet streets of the city until he pulled into a nearly empty overlook where the skyline stretched out like constellations trapped in glass buildings. He rested his hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly as if steadying himself before speaking. "Sometimes I disappear because I do not know how to let people see parts of my life," he said quietly. "Parts that do not fit with who I am when I am with you." I frowned, unsure what that meant. "Does that mean you are someone else when you are not with me?" He gave a humorless huff, something close to sad. "I wish it was that simple, Harper." I leaned back, studying him carefully. He seemed split in two, the man who fixed my cabinet door and listened to my mother talk about arthritis, and the man sitting beside me now tense, withdrawn. Distant, I asked softly, "Are you in trouble?" He shook his head. "Not the kind you are thinking of. Just responsibilities I cannot ignore." That sounded like something a politician would say, not a tech guy who claimed to be normal, but the longer I sat there, the more I felt the truth humming under his words. Something big, something he had been trying not to let leak into his time with me. I said gently, "You know, you do not have to pretend with me." He stared at the dashboard light reflecting in his eyes as if he were debating something. Then he finally whispered, "I know I do not want to, but every time I try to tell you more, I freeze because the last woman I trusted with the details of my life used them to hurt me." I sat silently, the weight of his confession settling in my chest. I wanted to reach for his hand, but I was afraid to push too much, too soon, he continued. "She was with me for years, said she loved me, and then she sold pieces of my life to the tabloids, my routines, my habits, my vulnerabilities, all for a payout. Harper." I felt a sting in my chest, imagining the kind of violation that must have felt like. Then, Adrian said something that seemed simple but cracked him open. I started believing people only liked the version of me they built in their heads, not the real one. I exhaled slowly because I understood that feeling more than he knew, and for the first time, I did not see a confident, calm man, but someone worn down by betrayal trying desperately to hold himself together. I asked quietly, "So which version do you think I see?" He looked at me. Finally, really looked at me, and his shoulders loosened just slightly. "The one who laughs easily," he murmured, "the one who cares about her mom, the one who works herself sick just to keep her world from falling apart. The real you, Harper. And maybe that is why it is so hard to talk about the rest of my life, because I do not want this to get poisoned too." His voice cracked on the last word before he caught it, but I heard it anyway. That was the moment the first crack in his mask appeared. Small, fragile, but real. I reached out, resting my hand gently on his forearm. I said softly, "You do not owe me your whole life, but you do not have to protect me from it either." He closed his eyes, breathing in my touch as if it grounded him when he opened them. His voice was low, almost defeated. "I want to tell you everything, but I am terrified it will change the way you look at me." I shook my head. "The only thing that will change how I look at you is if you lie to me, Adrian," and he flinched just barely, but enough for me to notice something deep inside him tightened, and his gaze dropped to the steering wheel again. I knew then that he was not just hiding something. He was hiding something big, something that scared him more than losing sleep and more than whatever responsibilities kept dragging him away. It scared him because he was terrified of losing me, I whispered. You do not have to tell me tonight, but someday you will. And he nodded slowly, almost painfully. Someday he agreed, but I could tell someday was going to arrive much sooner than either of us expected. The morning everything exploded started out painfully ordinary, which somehow made what followed feel even more unreal, because I woke up thinking the worst thing I had to deal with was the leak under the kitchen sink. But by noon, my entire life had been shoved under a spotlight, so harsh it felt like a punishment. I had not earned it. Began when I stepped out of the grocery store carrying a bag of rice, a carton of eggs, and the cheapest coffee on sale. The automatic doors whooshed open and a gust of cold air hit my face along with a blinding flash. I froze, and for a moment, I thought it was lightning, but then another flash and suddenly 3 men rushed toward me, cameras raised, shouting questions I could barely understand. Is it true? Are you two official? How long have you been seeing him? Did he pay you to stay quiet? I stumbled backward, almost dropping the groceries as the carton of eggs wobbled in my hands, and one of the men snapped a photo so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. I said, shakily, I think you have the wrong person. But they laughed as if I had told a joke, and one shoved his phone in my face, displaying a grainy picture taken the night Adrian walked me to my apartment. We stood under the broken hallway light, his hand brushing mine a moment so small, so private, and they had captured it like a trophy. Mystery woman seen again with New York tech millionaire. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not know what to say, because the truth was I was not anything. He had not even kissed me. We were not even officially dating. We were two people trying to understand whatever strange connection kept pulling us together. But none of that mattered to them. One of the paparazzi circled behind me, blocking my way, while another asked, Are you moving in with him? Is it true? You met his parents? Is this serious? I kept shaking my head, but every step I took, they took too. I finally raised my voice. Leave me alone, please. But instead of backing off, they fired more questions, more pictures, more assumptions. And the worst part was the expression on their faces, that smirking certainty, like they believed the story they were writing about my life more than I did. I finally slipped around them and hurried down the sidewalk, my heart hammering the eggs, shaking inside the carton and humiliation flooding my skin. So hot it almost burned. When I reached the bus stop, I sat down, hands trembling, groceries at my feet, trying to breathe, but people were staring at me. 2 teenagers whispering, a woman with a stroller glancing from her phone to me and back again, like she was comparing the photo to the real thing. My phone buzzed, and when I opened it, the headline hit me like a slap. Mystery girl spotted again with NYC millionaire Adrian Wolf. And below it, a zoomed shot of me stepping out of a diner the night he fixed my cabinet door. I felt sick. I typed a text to Adrian, something fumbling and frantic. But before I could hit send, another flash went off. Someone across the street pointing their phone at me like I was a spectacle to capture not a human being. I bolted, leaving the bus stop and practically running the 6 blocks home. When I reached my apartment building, my neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, was standing in the hallway, arms crossed. She said, I saw you on the internet. Harper, I hope you know what you are doing, and the tone was not concerned. It was judgment, a full verdict delivered. Without asking a single question, I closed the door behind me and slid down to the floor. Shaking, I wanted to cry, but the shock sat too heavily in my chest. My mom peeked out from the kitchen holding a spatula. Her brow furrowed. Sweetheart, what is going on? I did not know how to explain something I barely understood, so I just whispered, I think someone followed me last night, Mom. Her expression changed from confusion to worry. Instantly. Did that man hurt you? No, I said quickly, too quickly because now I was protecting him without even thinking about it. No, Mom, he did not hurt me. Someone else did, but even that sounded wrong because the paparazzi had not touched me. But they had taken something: photos, privacy, peace of mind, dignity. Something essential and fragile. I sat at the table while my mom made tea because she believed tea could fix most things, and for a long moment we sat in silence until she asked gently, Is he worth this? And I had no answer, because I did not know if Adrian even wanted me in. His life, beyond quiet dinners and conversations about childhood dreams, I did not know if we were anything real yet, or if everything between us was just possibility. When my phone rang, I almost jumped out of my skin. It was Adrian, his voice tight. "Harper, are you okay? Where are you?" I swallowed hard, trying not to cry. "Home," I whispered. "They followed me." "Adrian, I do not know what to do. I am so sorry," he said fiercely. "I tried to keep your name out of this. I thought I handled it. I thought I could protect you." I closed my eyes, the word protect echoing painfully, because whatever he was hiding, whatever he was afraid, would change how I looked at him. "It had now crashed into my life anyway," he said. "Harper, please let me come over," and I hesitated because I wanted him there, but also did not want my mother dragged into his world, so I said quietly, "Can we meet on the roof?" 10 minutes later, he climbed the last staircase and pushed open the heavy metal door, wind whipping his jacket as he walked toward me, worry etched deep into his face. "Harper, I did not want this for you. I swear, I tried to keep you far from this." We stood under the gray sky, the city a blur beneath us, and I felt something inside me fracture, not from him, but from the collision of our worlds, I said softly. "Adrian, they called me a gold digger online. They said I was using you." He closed the distance between us, jaw-clenching eyes fierce. "You are not using me, and I will shut every one of them down," but his determination could not erase the humiliation or fear or doubt that had lodged inside me. Because if one photo did this, what would more do? I said quietly. "I am not built for this world, Adrian. I work 2 jobs and clip coupons and mend my jeans 5 times before buying new ones. I cannot be some story for strangers to tear apart." He reached for my hands and I let him hold them, but the ache in my chest did not go away. "Harper, I like you," he said, and his voice cracked a little. "I like you more than I have liked anyone in a long time. We'll fix this. I promise." But promises made on rooftops under pressure felt fragile, and the wind carried my uncertainty across the city. I whispered, "I do not know if I can do this." Adrian, and the pain in his eyes told me he feared the same thing, but neither of us knew that this was only the beginning. That night began with a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush me, because after the paparazzi incident, my chest had carried a tightness I could not shake, and even though I kept telling myself that maybe things would calm down, maybe people would stop caring the truth, I could not breathe without wondering whose phone was pointed at me or who was whispering behind my back. And when Adrian called that evening, asking if he could come by to talk, I said yes, even though a part of me already knew something in me had begun to split in two. The girl I had always been and the woman he made me feel like I could be. But when he showed up at my door, the weight of everything I had been holding inside finally broke. I opened the door, and he stood there still in the same clothes from the rooftop hair, tousled from the wind. A look in his eyes I could not quite read. Relief, maybe desperation, maybe both. "Harper." He began softly stepping inside before I could even speak. "I am so sorry about today. I never wanted you to be hurt or humiliated like that. I will fix this. Just give me a little time." I shook my head because that was the thing. There was no fixing what already happened. You cannot undo humiliation. You cannot unsee headlines or unhear whispers or pretend the fear of strangers knowing your life will disappear overnight. I walked to the kitchen counter, gripping its edge, and said quietly, "Why did you not tell me who you were from the beginning?" Adrian exhaled, long and slow, running a hand over his jaw, because I wanted something real. "Harper, I wanted one person to talk to me without expecting anything, without calculating what they could gain from it." I shrugged bitterly, because I understood wanting real connection, but not at the cost of someone else's truth. "So you lied by omission." He flinched, like the words physically struck him. "I did not lie," he said barely above a whisper. "I hid, and I should not have. But I was scared, and that was the moment I felt something inside me twist, because fear was something I understood. Fear of being broke. Fear of losing my mom. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of never being enough. But the difference was I had never let my fear become someone else's burden, and he had. Whether he meant to or not, I turned around, looking him in the eyes. "Harper, please," he said. "You are the first person who has looked at me like a man, not a paycheck," but I knew he was trying to make this sound romantic, when really it felt like a responsibility I had never agreed to carry. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms, and asked quietly, "Do you know what happened to me today?" A teenage girl stopped me to take a picture with me. She thought it was funny that the Millionaire's mystery girl walked around carrying generic store-brand rice like I was some joke on the internet. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening with guilt, and I kept going. Because once the dam cracked, everything poured out. "I used to feel invisible," I said softly. "But today, for the first time in my life, I wished I was invisible. I wished no one knew my face. I wished I had never sat at your table." His eyes snapped open, fear flooding them. "Harper." Do not say that he took a step toward me, but I held up my hand and he froze mid-step, breath hitching like he already knew what was coming. I said quietly, "I cannot do this, Adrian." His face creased, pain slicing through his features like a blade. "Harper, please do not leave," he said, voice cracking. "I can protect you. I will hire security. I will shut down magazines. I will fix the narrative. I will do anything." And that was the moment I knew we lived in two different worlds, because he thought everything could be fixed with power, influence, money, while all I ever wanted was peace and honesty and a chance to live my life without feeling like a scandal waiting to happen. I shook my head, tears building in my eyes. "You cannot buy back my peace, Adrian. And you cannot build a life on something that started with a misunderstanding and grew on top of secrets." He swallowed hard, taking another step toward me, voice barely holding together. "I love you, Harper. Do not walk away from me." His confession ripped through something inside me because, despite everything I did, love him in some quiet, budding, impossible way. But loving someone was not enough if being with them meant losing myself. I whispered, "Adrian, I wanted to be enough for you, but your world, it terrifies me." He closed the distance, reaching for my hands, and for a moment, I let him hold them because letting go felt too final, too cruel. But then I gently pulled my hands back and his fingers closed on nothing. The look on his face shattered me. He whispered, "Harper, please, say something. Anything. Tell me what to do, to keep you." I wiped a tear from my cheek and said, the only truth I had left, "Let me go." His shoulders dropped, his chest caved as if the air had been pulled out of him, and he took a single stumbling step back like he could not trust his own legs. "Harper, please," he said again, but the truth was already in the room, hanging between us like a final verdict. I grabbed my coat from the chair, slipping it on with shaking hands, and walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the doorway, I turned back because even if I was hurting, I was not heartless. Adrian looked at me like a man losing the only thing that had kept him breathing. I whispered, "I am not walking away because I do not care. I am walking away because I care enough to know that if I stay, I will lose myself." I opened the door and he whispered my name one last time. Harper and I almost turned back, but almost is not enough to build a life on. So I stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind me, the click sharp and final, and the moment it shut, the first tear fell down my cheek, and another, until I was standing in the dim hallway crying quietly into my hands, knowing that breaking my own heart was the only way to protect it. For days after I walked away from Adrian, the world felt strangely muted, like someone had turned the volume down on everything I used to care about. The morning crowds at the diner no longer annoyed me. The sound of dishes clattering no longer startled me. Even the exhaustion of juggling shifts, classes, and caring for my mom felt distant, as though my body was moving, but my mind had been left behind. Somewhere on that wet sidewalk outside my apartment, where Adrian had whispered my name like it was a prayer or a plea, and maybe both. And yet, not once did he show up at my door. Not once did he call. Not a single message or apology came, and in an odd, agonizing way, that silence hurt even more, because I expected him to fight. I expected him to chase me, but instead, what I got was nothing, and that nothingness, made me wonder if maybe I had overestimated my place in his life. Maybe I really had been just a distraction, a spark of normalcy in his glittering world of power and money, and maybe once the spark faded, there was nothing left to salvage until the morning. I found an envelope taped to my door, a plain white envelope with my name written in Adrian's handwriting, the ink slightly smudged as if he had hesitated a long time before writing it. I stood there for a long moment, palms sweaty, heart pounding, before finally tearing it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper neatly folded. No dramatic declarations, no excuses, no begging, just a letter in handwriting. I recognized a mix of elegance and tension. Harper, I am not asking for you back. I know I forfeited the right to that when I built something with you on a half-truth. I am only asking to tell you the full truth once, not to justify, only to be honest. I read those words over and over, my breath catching in my throat as the rest of the letter unraveled. A life I had never imagined. He spoke about growing up wealthy but lonely, raised by nannies and security guards more than by parents. He spoke about the first woman he ever loved, a girl who treated him like a hero until the moment she realized he was worth more as a resource than as a partner. He spoke about the betrayal of a friend who publicly leaked his private messages for profit, leaving him to be torn apart by tabloids who painted him as a villain. He spoke of panic attacks that made him fear crowds, flashbulbs that made him freeze, and a loneliness so deep he compared it to living underwater, while everyone else breathes air. And then he wrote this: "You were the first person in years who looked at me without calculating what I could give you. You were the first person who spoke to me without performing. You were the first person who made me feel human again, and I was terrified of losing that, terrified enough to hide who I was instead of trusting you to choose me anyway." I closed the letter, pressing the paper against my chest, because for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, and maybe that was the first crack in the wall I had built around my heart. The next morning, Mom found me sitting on the couch, staring at the letter. She poured herself tea, sat down beside me, and said softly, "Good men make mistakes. Great men try to fix them." I blinked up at her, surprised by her gentle tone. Mom shook her head with a knowing smile. "Honey, the way he looked at you when he came by that night, he looked like someone who would rip the world apart to keep you safe. He just does not know how to say it right now." And something about her words loosened a knot inside me, because if there was one person who understood brokenness and healing, it was my mother. Later that afternoon, when I returned from my shift, another envelope waited for me, this one thinner and containing only a photograph. An old one of Adrian at maybe 20 years old, smiling on a beach with 3 friends behind him, and on the back a single line: "Before I learned that people could smile at you and still be lying." I sank onto the couch holding the photo as if it were fragile, because for the first time I saw the boy he used to be before. Wealth before betrayal, before fame, before fear. The next day, there was no envelope but a small box inside, was a key and a note. "If you want answers, I will be here. No pressure." The address written below was a place I recognized, a public art studio downtown, known for being open late. A safe, neutral environment. I debated going for hours, sitting by the window, tapping my fingers against the glass, wondering if showing up meant forgiveness or just curiosity, and whether I was ready for either. Eventually, curiosity won. I walked to the studio in the cool evening air, my heart throbbing in my chest as I pushed the door open. The smell of paint and turpentine greeted me along with a soft hum of music. And there, sitting by the window surrounded by canvases, was Adrian, his head bowed, his hands clasped as if he had been sitting there for hours, waiting without expectation. He looked up when I stepped inside, his eyes widening, not with triumph but with something raw enough to make my breath catch. Gratitude, relief, fear, all mixed together. "Harper," he said, standing slowly as if afraid. Sudden movement would scare me off. I held up the key in my hand. "What is this?" I asked gently, despite the tension in my voice. Adrian swallowed hard. "Every truth I owe you." And he gestured to the canvases around him, each one painted with scenes of New York, but not the wealthy, polished city he lived in. They were scenes of diners and subway cars and street markets. Places I had told him about, places he had visited only because I mentioned them, and somehow each brushstroke felt like an apology because it meant he had listened, he had remembered, he had cared, and then he spoke without theatrics or self-pity. Just quiet honesty. I do not want you back if being with me means destroying your peace. I just want you to know that you were the only real thing I have had in years, and losing you hurt in a way money cannot fix. And suddenly my anger cracked because I saw the man, not the millionaire, the hurt, not the headline, the humanity, not the image. I whispered, Adrian, why did you not fight for me? His expression softened because you said to let you go. And for once, I wanted to choose what was right for you, not for me. Those words landed like a stone in my chest because they were the apology I did not know. I needed not desperation, not begging, just respect, just love in its most unpolished form. I stepped closer, my voice trembling. I am still hurt. Adrian, he nodded. I know, and I am not asking you to stop being hurt. Just let me carry some of it with you. Silence stretched between us, but it felt different now, not heavy but open a doorway to something new. Something possible, something honest, and as I stood there holding the key he had given me, I realized I was not ready to forgive, but maybe I was ready to begin. I did not expect anything after that night at the studio when Adrian stood in front of those canvases like a man handing over his heart piece by piece with no promise that I would accept a single fragment, and for the next week, everything between us felt suspended. Not broken, but not repaired either. Like a bridge someone had started rebuilding but could not finish until the weather cleared. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Customers still snapped fingers at me at the diner. Mom still needed medication, refills. The bills still came in with every kind of red lettering possible. And yet every night I found myself rereading Adrian's letters as if the truth he had offered was the only thing keeping me from sinking. But then one Thursday afternoon, after a long double shift, my manager asked me to stay behind, and my chest tightened because usually when a job asked to talk, it meant trouble. But instead, he said, Harper, someone came by looking for you. Tall guy, expensive shoes. I knew immediately who it was, even though he had not shown his face once since the studio conversation when I stepped outside. There was no one waiting. No sleek car. No. Adrian, just a small envelope leaning against the restaurant door with my name written on it again. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single line. Meet me here, if you want to see something I made for you. Followed by an address downtown near the Arts District, a place full of renovated warehouses and trendy galleries. The kind of place I usually avoided because it reminded me too much of everything I could not afford. But that night, something inside me pushed me forward. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope, maybe the version of myself I used to be. Before life got heavy, I took the subway, the entire ride, my heart thumping like a warning or an invitation, I could not tell which. When I finally reached the address, it was an old brick building with tall windows glowing with soft golden light. My breath caught as soon as I stepped inside. The space was spacious, quiet, warm, and filled with a faint smell of sawdust and fresh paint, like a home being built. Not a gallery prepared for show. There were exposed beams, hardwood floors, and track lighting that illuminated empty white walls, waiting for something, waiting for someone, waiting for me. Adrian stood near the center of the room, wearing jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded attention at galas. He looked almost shy when he turned toward me as if he did not know whether I would walk in or walk back out. Harper, he said softly, his voice a mixture of fear and hope. I froze, my fingers tightening around my coat. This place. What is this? Adrian swallowed. This is yours. I blinked. Yours. He nodded, stepping aside to reveal the far wall. A wall covered in prints, sketches, and charcoal drawings, but not his mine. Every sketch I had ever posted online, every piece I had taped to my apartment wall, every drawing I thought no one noticed, he had printed them, framed them, arranged them like a curated exhibition, lighting them as though they were worth thousands of dollars. I felt dizzy. This is not funny, I whispered. It is not a joke, Adrian said quickly, moving closer but stopping short of touching me. This is your studio, the one you told me you dreamed of since you were 16. The one you said felt impossible because dreams like that belong to people with money or connections. I could barely breathe. The studio, the space, the lighting, the walls. It was all exactly what I had described to him in pieces over months. Tiny details woven into conversations he must have memorized and stitched together into this place. I managed to say, "Adrian, I cannot accept this." He nodded gently. "I know, and I am not asking you to, not yet. Maybe not ever." Then, why I choked, because he said, taking a slow breath, "When you love someone, you want to see them live, not survive, and I have watched you survive long enough." My knees almost buckled. He hurried on. "I am not asking you to come back to me. I am not asking for anything in return. I just wanted you to see what you deserve, even if it is not with me." The words hit me like a blow because they were too soft, too genuine, too selfless to be manipulation. And suddenly I felt anger rising, but not at him, at the world, at the unfairness of how long I had gone, thinking my dreams were too big for someone like me, and now someone like him, someone who had everything, was trying to hand me the confidence I had never been given. I whispered brokenly, "Adrian, why would you do this? You don't owe me anything." His voice cracked. "No, Harper, but you saved me. And maybe this is the only way I know how to thank you." "I saved you," I whispered, remembering the night he told me I made him feel human again. He nodded. "Not from danger, from loneliness." That was the moment something inside me cracked fully, because I realized this was not a billionaire trying to buy forgiveness. This was a man trying to give me something no one had ever given me before. Belief. Real. Honest. Painful. Belief. Adrian stepped back. "Giving me space, I will leave you alone with it," he said. "Just look around, then decide what to do next." And for the next hour, I wandered the studio, touching the door frames, the tables, the brushes he had laid out new, still in their packaging, the little sink in the back, perfect for cleaning pallets. He had even placed a small stool in the corner with a vase of cheap flowers, like the ones I often picked from street vendors, because I could not afford bouquets. Nothing about the place felt expensive for the sake of being expensive. It felt intentional, thoughtful, built for me, not a millionaire's fantasy, but my reality. My dream translated into wood and nails and light and heart. When I finally stepped back outside, the night air hit me hard. I found Adrian leaning against his car, hands stuffed in his pockets, head down like he expected me to tell him to never contact me again. I approached slowly, my heart thudding louder than traffic. He did not look up until I said quietly, "You remembered everything?" His eyes lifted slowly, the softness in them almost undoing me. "I remember every word, Harper, because they were the few real moments in my life that ever felt like they mattered." I swallowed hard, tears burning my eyes. "I do not know what this means yet." "Adrian," I said honestly, "I am still hurt. I am still scared." He nodded, "And I am still sorry, and I am willing to be patient for as long as you need. But Harper, whatever happens, your dream should not die, because you were too busy taking care of everyone else." I looked at him a long time, seeing not the money, not the status, not the mistakes, but the man behind all of it. The man who sometimes looked like he had been carrying the weight of the whole world alone. I took a breath, shaky but sure, and whispered thank you, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like the beginning of something, not the end. I did not plan on calling him again, but the studio kept echoing inside my mind like a heartbeat that refused to settle every time I walked past the blank canvases waiting for the life I might paint into them, or every time I caught myself imagining colors spilling across the walls. I thought of him and the way he had stood in that golden light with hope stitched into every breath he took, as if my happiness was something he believed in more than I ever had. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury the memory under work shifts, overdue, bills, and my mother's quiet pain. But one night as I cleaned tables long after closing, I found myself staring at a half-empty cup of coffee and whispering under my breath, "I need to see him again. Not to forgive, not to return, just to look him in the eyes and ask the question that had been gnawing through my ribs." Why me? I texted him before I could talk myself out of it. Meet me at the place where it started, and I hit send before fear could drag my finger back. His reply came, seconds later, a single sentence. I will be there. Harper. The restaurant had always intimidated me. Tall ceilings, dark wood tables, warm amber lighting that made everyone look softer, richer, more certain of where they belonged. But this time, as I walked in, something felt different. Not easier, but clearer, like I was stepping into a moment I had been circling for months without naming it. Adrian was already there, standing by the same table where I had once collapsed into a mess of nerves and mistaken identity. He wore a simple charcoal suit, nothing flashy, nothing meant to impress, but he still looked like he carried the weight of entire boardrooms in the way he stood. Yet when his eyes found mine, all that power melted into something vulnerable, something almost fragile. His voice was soft. Hi, Harper. I swallowed my nerves. Hi. We sat across from each other. The ghost of that first night lingering between us as the waiter poured water and stepped away. Adrian inhaled slowly as if bracing himself. I know, you did not come here to hear excuses, Harper. I nodded. Good, because I am done with excuses. I need truth. He nodded truth then. All right. You asked me why I hid who I was the night we met. I kept waiting for him to spin it into something polished, something smooth. But instead, Adrian looked straight at me and said, because the moment I saw you sit down, I felt something I had not felt in years, and I panicked. I frowned. Something. I asked. He gave a small broken laugh. Yes, something real, and that scared me. I leaned back, suddenly aware of how quiet the restaurant was around us, the clinking silverware conversations all fading into a dull hum. He continued, Harper, before I met you, I lived a life that had people surrounding me, but none of them truly saw me. My last relationship ended because she treated me like a brand, not a man. My business partners used my name more than my voice. And then you sat at my table thinking I was someone ordinary, and it was the first breath of air I had gotten in years. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to argue that it was still wrong, that he should have told me, but something deeper ached beneath all of that. I whispered, You should have told me the truth. Adrian nodded. I know I failed you. I failed myself too. But every time I tried to tell you, I looked at you and thought, if I tell her, she will leave, and I could not risk losing the only part of my life that felt honest. His voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, the powerful CEO everyone feared looked like a man terrified of being abandoned again. I leaned forward. Why me? Adrian, there are a million beautiful, successful, confident women in your world. Why pick a waitress with overdue rent and second-hand clothes? He shook his head slowly. That is exactly why, Harper. Because you never wanted anything from me except my presence. Because you looked at me and did not flinch. Because your world was built from grit and heart, and I was tired of people built from pretense and ambition. I looked down, letting his words settle. Inside me, like warm light filling cold corners of my chest, silence stretched between us, but for once it was not painful, it was grounding. Then he said the words that shifted the room. Harper, I love you. My breath stopped, the way a storm stops when the first lightning strikes not quietly but with power. I shook my head slightly confused, hurt, moved with love, all tangled together. Adrian whispered, and I know I do not deserve a second chance. Not after the way I hurt you, but I also know I cannot spend another day pretending I do not feel this. You changed my entire life the moment you sat at the wrong table. I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping without permission, because I finally allowed myself to admit what had been true long before tonight. I loved him too, but love was not the question. Trust was. I opened my eyes slowly and whispered, I do not know how to do this. Adrian, his shoulders dropped in disappointment, but I held up a hand. I do not know how to step into your world, not when I have spent my whole life holding things together with duct tape and hope. But maybe we can build something new, something that is ours, not yours, not mine. His eyes widened. Harper, are you saying? I reached across the table and took his hand for the first time, without fear. I am saying, I am willing to try. If you are willing to stand with me, not ahead of me, not behind me, he gripped my hand as if afraid I would vanish. I will stand wherever you need me, he said, voice thick with emotion. The waiter approached with our food, but neither of us touched a single bite. We just sat there, holding hands across the table where everything had once gone wrong. Now, feeling like the place where everything was finally beginning when we stepped out into the night, the city lights reflecting on wet pavement, Adrian looked at me as if seeing his future, not his past, and I realized with a strange, fierce certainty that my life had shifted. My next chapter had just begun, and it was going to be written with him. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after the dinner that changed us when I found a sleek black envelope slipped under my apartment door, the kind of envelope that made your skin prickle before you even touched it. No return address, no stamp. Just my name written in handwriting so sharp it felt carved instead of penned. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single glossy photo of Adrian standing beside a woman, stunning, polished, and smiling like she owned the ground. She walked on the caption scrawled in red marker. Read, "He always comes back to what matches him." I stared at the picture until the edges blurred and my throat tightened. That must be his ex, the one he never named, the one who hurt him, the one who left scars. I had barely begun to understand. I shoved the photo into my drawer and told myself not to make assumptions, but the unease hung over me like fog. I got my answer later that afternoon when a gentle knock sounded on my door. I thought it was Adrian, coming by early until I opened it and froze. The woman from the photograph was standing there in a camel coat, tall, elegant, her hair perfect, her smile cold. "Harper," she said, my name like she already pitied me. I forced myself to breathe. "Yes, can I help you?" She stepped inside without waiting for permission, her perfume sharp and expensive, drifting into the room as she looked around with the kind of judgment people reserve for cheap apartments and cheaper dreams. "I am Vanessa," she said smoothly. "Finally. We meet." My heart dropped, so this was her. The woman who had once been part of Adrian's life. The woman who thought she still had ownership in some twisted way. I crossed my arms. "If you came to make a point, you have about 2 minutes. Vanessa's smile widened. "Oh, I am not here to threaten you," she said, but the lie glinted in her eyes. "I am here to warn you. Adrian is a man who falls in love with projects, not people." I stiffened. "Excuse me, he likes things he can fix." She continued brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "Strays, misfits, broken women he can rescue for a while at least, but eventually he grows tired and moves on." I felt heat rising in my face, but she kept talking, her voice dripping poison. "I was once his project too, until he found another, until he left me in pieces. You think you are different, Harper, but trust me when I say this, he will choose his world over you." Every time she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He built an empire, and empires do not bend for girls whose biggest dream is a tiny art studio." My stomach twisted because she had found the one fear I had not dared to say out loud, that maybe all of this was borrowed time. Maybe I was temporary, maybe the wrong table had led to the wrong life, and I had let myself fall for something that would eventually crush me. I took a breath and forced my voice to stay steady. "You do not know me. You do not know my worth." Vanessa let out a gentle, knowing laugh. "Honey men like Adrian do not end up with women like you. That was enough." I walked to the door, opened it wide, and said, clearly, "Get out!" Her eyes flickered with annoyance before she slipped on her sunglasses and walked out as gracefully as she had entered. But before she turned to the corner, she left one final blow. "He will disappoint you, Harper. He always does." The door clicked shut, and it felt like the whole apartment shrank around me. I pressed my hands against my face, trying to breathe, trying to shake off the venom she left behind, but the truth was, her words burrowed deeper than I wanted to admit. So when Adrian came over that evening with takeout and a hopeful smile, he found me quieter, distant, my mind replaying Vanessa's taunts on a loop. He set the food on the table and studied me. "Harper, what is wrong? Talk to me." I hesitated, then whispered, "Adrian, who is Vanessa?" His body went still. He closed his eyes as if bracing for a storm, then sat down slowly, his voice low. She is someone who used to matter to me a long time ago and who refused to accept that it is over. My throat tightened. She says you always choose your world over people. Adrian looked up sharply. That is not true. You hid your life from me, I said. You let the media tear me apart. You have an entire life I know nothing about. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back the distance between us, widening like a crack in the foundation. Harper, please listen, he said. I did hide things, but not because I doubted you, because I doubted myself. I have been used, lied to, manipulated by the people closest to me. Vanessa among them. She is beautiful. Yes. Smart. Yes, but she loved my influence, not my heart, when I realized that I walked away. She could not handle losing the power that came with my name, and she has been trying to claw her way back into my world ever since. None of that moved me as much as the next sentence he spoke. And I did not tell you because I was terrified you would think I still belonged to that world. I stared at him, seeing something new behind his eyes. Not just guilt, but fear, the kind of fear that came from loving someone too much, from risking yourself on a fragile hope. Adrian stepped closer, his voice shaking. I am choosing differently now. Harper, everything I do for a future. I want with you. We stood there in silence, the air heavy with everything unspoken. He was flawed. I was scared. We were both learning how to navigate a world neither of us had been prepared for. Slowly, I exhaled and whispered, I need time. This is a lot. He nodded immediately as if he had expected the answer. I will take whatever time you need. Just let me prove that she is wrong about me. I watched him leave the hallway light, catching on the tension in his shoulders, and for the first time since meeting him, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to protect myself, but belief was a risk, and love was an even bigger one. As the door closed, I pressed my back against it, feeling my heartbeat settle into a rhythm that felt like waiting. I spent the next week balancing on a thread between wanting to protect my heart and wanting to let it open again. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a tug in my chest, hoping it was Adrian, then panicking that it actually was. He sent simple messages, not pleading, not pushing, just reminders that he was still there. A good morning text, a picture of a sunset with the note, you once said, this was your favorite time of day. Hope it still is. And once a message that simply read, I am not giving up on us. But there were no surprises, no attempts to corner me, no pressure. It was the first time in my life I felt someone step back. Not because they were leaving, but because they wanted me to breathe after 7 days of silence from my end. I woke up with the feeling that something had shifted inside me, like my fear had finally grown tired of fighting my hope. When my mom asked how I was doing, I told her the truth. I miss him. She smiled that soft mother smile, the kind that held both love and history. Then, my sweet girl, maybe it is time to stop punishing yourself for loving someone. I laughed because she was right. I had been punishing myself, not him, so I texted Adrian, can we talk? His reply came within seconds. Yes, of course, whenever you want my apartment 7 tonight, he added, then almost shyly. I will cook. I had no idea he could cook, but I learned soon enough that the man owned restaurants through investments. So maybe it was less surprising when I arrived. The entire place smelled like rosemary lemon and something warm and comforting. When he opened the door, his eyes softened in a way that almost broke me. He greeted me quietly, as if giving me space to decide whether to step forward or walk away. I stepped in. The living room was dimly lit, the table set with just 2 plates, candles, but nothing pretentious, nothing overwhelming, just a man who wanted to try for me. We ate mostly in silence until he finally spoke. His voice careful, Harper. I know you did not come here for apologies, but I need to say one more thing. I did not hide who I was because I thought you could not handle my world. I hid it because for the first time in years, I found someone who saw me before seeing my money, and I was scared of losing that. I met his eyes and whispered, I know. He took a deep breath, then stood and walked to his bookshelf, pulling out a small wooden box. When he returned, he placed it gently in front of me. I looked up, confused. Open it, he said softly. My hands shook a little as I lifted the lid. Inside was a sketch 1. I had drawn years ago and posted online. A little girl sitting on a stoop, drawing flowers and chalk around her, while the city rushed around her. Untouched, unnoticed, coloring her own world to survive. Adrian said, "You posted this 5 years ago. You wrote that you dreamed of opening a studio for kids, like her kids who needed a place to feel seen." I swallowed hard, tears forming in my eyes. "You remembered everything you have ever said," Adrian replied. "You never asked me for help, never hinted you wanted anything from me. You just shared your heart without expecting anything back, so I wanted to show you something." He stood, walked to the balcony door, and pulled it open. "Harper, come with me." My pulse quickened as I followed him outside, overlooking the city lights below. But he pointed not at the skyline, at the building across the street where a glowing sign hung newly installed, "Hale, Art Studio for Kids." My hand flew to my mouth, my throat tight. I whispered, "Adrian, what did you do?" He shook his head. "No, Harper, what we are building is for you. I only laid the bricks, but you are the foundation." I stared at the studio, the logo painted in soft pastel colors, a chalk flower drawn right in the center. Mirroring the one from my sketch, tears blurred the view as I turned back to him. "Adrian, this is too much." He took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly. "Nothing I give you will ever be a payment. It is not a gift. It is not charity. It is a partnership. You inspired the idea. I just ran with it before I could respond." He gently reached for my hand, then slowly lowered himself to one knee. Not theatrically, not with flair, but with a softness that made my heart collapse. He held my hand like it was something precious. "Harper," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You sat at the wrong table, but from that moment, I knew you were the right woman. Everything in my life has been loud until you. You are quiet, steady, real. You are the only person who has ever loved me without trying to gain anything. You saw the man, not the millionaire." He took a breath, his hands trembling slightly. "I love you, Harper, not the fantasy, not the version you think you need to be. I love you exactly as you are." His eyes never left mine, full of hope and fear and a kind of reverence I never thought I would see directed at me. He opened a small velvet box inside, was not a giant diamond, but a simple, elegant ring. A rose, cut stone in a thin gold band. It was humble, it was honest, it was me. "Harper, Hale, will you marry me?" I did not answer right. Away, because I could not. My voice was gone, overwhelmed, stolen by shock and love and disbelief. But I knelt down too, cupping his face with shaking hands, and whispered, "Yes." Adrian exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. He slipped the ring on my finger, and I swear the world sharpened, the air clearer, the lights brighter, the future bigger. He pulled me into his arms, and the city below felt like it disappeared around us later when we went back inside, sitting on the couch. His forehead resting against mine, he whispered the words that sealed everything we had fought through. "We are building a life, Harper, not a fantasy, not a fairy tale, a real life. One we choose together, and for the first time in my entire life I believed it would last." The morning after the proposal, I woke to sunlight spilling across Adrian's apartment, and for a moment I lay still, letting every piece of the last 12 hours settle into me. The balcony, the ring, the studio, the way he looked at me as if I were both the beginning and the ending of his world. It felt unreal and startlingly ordinary at the same time, like slipping into a life I had been walking toward for years without noticing. When I padded barefoot into the kitchen, he was already there, cooking in a white t-shirt, humming softly to himself. He looked up, smiled in that gentle way that made my chest ache, and said, "Good morning, sweetheart," as if we had been sharing mornings for decades. We ate quietly but comfortably, our knees brushing under the table like a small promise. After breakfast, we walked across the street to the studio, the one he named Hale Art Studio for Kids. And even though he had shown me from the balcony seeing it up close, hit differently, the windows painted with bright colors, the chalk flower on the logo, the little benches inside the smell of fresh paint and possibility. Brandon the carpenter waved as he installed the last display shelves. "Congratulations, you two," he called. I glanced up at Adrian, realizing the whole crew knew before I even said yes. And instead of embarrassment, I felt this warm bloom in my chest like the universe had been rooting for us from the start. Kids from the neighborhood peeked in, curious, their laughter echoing in the empty space, and I felt something settle deep inside me, a certainty this was where I belonged, where my heart had been trying to go long before I ever stumbled into the wrong table on a blind date. Over the next month, life shifted into something slow and sacred. My mom moved into the spare room of our new apartment, a cozy place just a block away from the studio. She adored Adrian in the quiet way mothers adore men who make their daughters shine. She'd sit at the kitchen table knitting, watching us cook together, and she'd smile the kind of smile that carried relief and gratitude. And maybe a little awe on weekdays, I opened the studio teaching free art classes funded entirely by Adrian but run entirely by me. We agreed early on. No spotlight, no press, no announcements. This place wasn't for publicity. It was for kids who needed what I once needed, a space to breathe, a space to be seen. The first day, a little girl named Riley showed up, holding her sketchbook like a shield. She was shy, barely spoke, but when I knelt beside her and asked who taught you to draw, she whispered, "No one. I just pretend I can." Adrian watched from the doorway as Riley slowly opened up, her fear melting into joy, and he looked at me like he was watching magic. He never hovered, never tried to take control. He just stood there, hands in pockets, soaking in the way the room changed when the kids started painting. Like the noise healed him in places he had not known were broken. Weekends were ours. Slow mornings, long walks through the park, spontaneous trips to tiny diners where no one recognized him, and for the first time I understood what he meant. When he said he was tired of being seen as a bank account, he would touch my cheek lightly, brush my hair, tuck me under his arm when we crossed streets. Little gestures, but each one felt like a stitch knitting two lives into one. Sometimes he'd look at me across the table mid-breakfast, smile softly, and say, "You know, if you never sat at that table, I never would have found you." Our wedding was not the kind anyone expected. It was small, held in the studio itself, with canvases lining the walls. Kids' drawings hung like decorations, light streaming through the windows in warm honey gold. My mom walked me down the aisle laughing because she kept crying and smudging her makeup. Adrian waited at the front, simple suit, hair slightly messy because I ran my fingers through it before we started. He looked at me like he was memorizing every breath I took. We exchanged vows that weren't perfect but honest mine, shaking his steady. We promised to choose each other even on the days it felt difficult to build a life that was real, not curated. And when he kissed me, the kids cheered louder than the adults. After the ceremony, he lifted me in the middle of the studio, spinning me around as paint flecks drifted from a drying canvas like confetti. We danced barefoot on the paint-splattered floor. Mom clapped Riley, hugged my waist. The music crackled through old speakers, Adrian whispered in my ear. "Wrong table. Best miracle." And I laughed into his shoulder. Much later, after everyone left, we lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, hand in hand, the studio quiet, except for our breaths, he whispered. "Tell me something true, Harper." I turned my face to his. "You freed parts of me I thought were broken beyond repair." He brushed his thumb over my knuckles. "You rebuilt me too." Days turned into weeks, then into months. The studio thrived, the kids flourished. My mom regained her strength. Adrian learned to sleep without the weight of his past pressing on his sternum, and I learned that love wasn't something you found. It was something you built, board by board, moment by moment, choosing each other again and again, even on the days you weren't sure of yourself. Every once in a while, someone at a grocery store or a cafe would whisper, "Isn't that Adrian Wolf, the Millionaire CEO?" But instead of shrinking or running like I once would have, I would just take his hand and squeeze. He'd smile softly as if reminding me, "You are the place I belong at night." When the city outside grew quiet, we sat on the couch sharing warm drinks, looking at the ring that still felt new, and he would say gently, "You know, this all started with a mistake," and I would rest my head on his shoulder, feeling the truth deepen in my bones. Everything good in my life came from the worst, most embarrassing moment I ever had. Then I'd whisper the words that had become our mantra. Wrong table, right love, right life. If Harper's story touched something inside you tonight, I want you to take a moment and sit with that feeling because stories like hers are not just entertainment. They are reminders. Reminders that life is strangely unpredictable, unfair in ways we never saw coming, and yet beautifully generous in its own time. We have all sat at the wrong table at some point in our lives. Maybe not in a fancy New York restaurant, maybe not in a borrowed dress with shaky hands and a hopeful heart. But in our own way, we have all stepped into moments that made us feel out of place, unworthy, or unprepared. Sometimes life humiliates us before it blesses us. Sometimes life confuses us before it reveals the truth. And sometimes it places the right person in front of us at the exact moment we are convinced we belong nowhere. Harper walked into that restaurant thinking she was too small for that world. Too poor, too simple, too ordinary. But life has a way of whispering, even in our most embarrassing moments, that something bigger is coming. She sat at the wrong table, yet somehow found the person who saw her worth before she could see it herself. And maybe that is the message you needed today. Maybe you have been doubting yourself, questioning whether you deserve love after betrayal, respect after humiliation, or joy after loss. Maybe you have been telling yourself that your dreams are too impossible, too late, too foolish to chase. But if Harper taught us anything, it is that worthiness is not about money or status or the approval of strangers who judge your clothes or your past. Worthiness begins when you stop running from who you are. When Harper learned the truth about Adrian, she walked away, not because he was rich, but because she needed to know she mattered for the right reasons. She needed to reclaim her voice before she could share her heart. And when she finally chose love again, she chose it not from desperation, but from strength. That is what real second chances look like. Not perfect people, not perfect timing. Just two imperfect hearts deciding they still believe in goodness. If you felt that rise in your chest, that small ache, that warm sting behind your eyes as their story unfolded, then you already know this is not just about romance. This is about hope, about healing, about bravery, about the courage it takes to walk into a life you were never taught to expect. You deserve a love like the one Harper found, a love that meets you at your weakest moment and still chooses to stay. A love that sees your dreams not as burdens, but as possibilities waiting to bloom. And if that kind of love hasn't found you yet, maybe it is still on its way. Maybe you are one unexpected moment away from your entire life changing. If this story reminded you that the heart still knows how to hope even after everything you have survived, then I want to ask you for something simple. Give this video a thumbs up so the algorithm knows people like you still believe in stories that heal. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that the wrong turn can sometimes lead to the right destiny. And if you want more stories like this, stories that honor the quiet strength in ordinary people, stories that lift you, comfort, you stay with you long after they end, then subscribe to this channel. We are building a community where your heart matters, where your journey matters, where every chapter of your life is worth telling. Because at the end of the day, Harper's story is not just hers. It is ours. It is yours. A reminder that even the most unexpected mistakes can become the beginning of something breathtakingly right. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and stay with us for the next story.